All right. Sorry, I'm a Luddite, so you have to apologize. When it comes to technology, I will do everything slow. First of all, I want to thank you all for letting me come and talk to you today. Spreading the good word of debate is my favorite thing to do. And so I want to really say thank you to all for taking a couple minutes out of your day to let me talk to you about how I see debate, which may be a little different than some of the other ways we've talked about it in the past. My name is Christensen, for those of you that don't know me. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. I'm currently the coach at Westside, formerly the coach at Millard South, and I'll tell you a little bit about my history in debate, and more as this lecture goes on, you'll learn more about me. One of the things you're going to find out is that the type of debate that I talk about is profoundly personal, which means that it will also be impossible for me to separate myself from this discussion we're having. I started out in debate as an 8th grader. My older brother was a debater. He taught me how to debate. I never got to go to it. He never got to go to a debate camp. I was lucky enough to have him, and he taught me for the first 2 years. Then I went to debate camp in Michigan. Debate camp, as you know, is the best time of the year. So it's exciting to spend a little bit of your time thinking and talking about these things. I started out as a traditional debater. I went for politics and states counterplan every domestic topic. I consulted China every negative topic, and then I quit debate because of a number of reasons that we won't discuss in this company. But the truth of the matter is that I got an opportunity to come back to debate, which a lot of people don't get. And when I came back to myself, I said, as a coach, I have to do something different than when I was a competitor. As a competitor, you know, many times you go into the debate round and you justify the gross amount of work that you all do by winning and losing ballots. And as a coach, I couldn't do that. I couldn't go into the room and debate. I didn't have that interaction. That was always my motivation to do work. So when I came back to debate, I said to myself, I'm not going to cut or read or do anything that doesn't fascinate me personally about the process that we're engaging in. And at that point, I wasn't interested in what the politics dissent had to say anymore. I was interested in some other books. I was interested in comic books. I was interested in activism. And so we created a new way to debate, or some people laid down a new way to teach me how to debate. And it's called performance debate. Some people call it performance debate. Some people don't label it. It's whatever you want to call it. But it is debate with an aesthetic component, meaning that part of the idea is the presentation, and it's debate with a little bit different content. The first thing I'm going to do for you is do a performance. Given that that is what this type of debate is about, I want to share something that we've done in the past. Now, this is from a past topic. I'll give you an idea about the topic, or the 1AC we're writing right now. But I wanted to give you an idea of something that was finished. And any of you who know me for long enough to know that war is something that I find detestable, and therefore I wanted to read you one of our treatises against American hegemony in war. This is for the topic 3 years ago. It's called the Mekong Diaries. What this is it's a diaries of Viet Cong impressionist artists who were on the ground during the Vietnam War conflict. And it's interesting because the colonial tradition that the French gave to these Vietnamese people was to be impressionist painters. And these paintings, which you're about to see, sort of are designed to show the other side of the conflict, to problematize the way that we think about war in the world. And so, give me 8 minutes of your time, and we'll see what we can do here. All right. Make sure I can play. All right. A discarded newspaper from Hanoi, 1972. The headlines, stories, reports, the daily drone of news speaking to the awful conditions of war. Tran Trung Tim looks at the newsprint. Thousands of words swim on the page, attempting to describe the indescribable, to tell it as it is, but the media on both sides sought propaganda above the truth. The American desire to vilify the savage communist North, and the People Liberation Front desire to glorify the struggle for revolution to maintain its recruitment base. For tin, the newsprint dissolves into a more sobering reality. It covers itself in paint. This is observation one: girl, gun, flower. The oil on newspaper was dated Hanoi 1972. The image of war was a naked girl, symbol of innocence, holding a gun, symbol of war, and a black flower, symbol of humanity harmed, but not yet lost. Hidden on the outside world were thousands of harmed but not lost. This image does not instruct us on the just cause of either side, does not pick sides, it redraws the boundaries for debate. Normally on the imposition of war, we debate about our security, our values, our resources, our revenge, or other just cause, and finding and eliminating the other which threatens our way of life. The debate from the other side will argue for its own just causes. They will speak to the evil of the other side, talk about their own desire to protect their people and their way of life. Talk continues on both sides, hands clamped tightly over their ears until there is nothing left to do except play the old war game until they have proven themselves right. Not by force of logic, or of reason, or of honesty, but of force alone. History is written by those who have hung heroes from castle walls. This painting reminds us that the only victory in the time of war happens when the human spirit raises above its suffering and shows its transcendental magnificence, beauty from suffering, and that we are reminded of the middle path, not to choose America or the National Liberation Front, but to rather realize the awful cost of war itself. Hidden to the outside world were thousands of drawings and sketches, iconic and fragile proof of humanity in war. The artist created under fire with charcoal, ink, pens, ballpoint pens, magic markers, and tiny watercolor paint scents. These drawings were a visual collective memory from the other side of this conflict. If people could see these graceful images by the savage Viet Cong, they would understand that war is a psychotic episode, madness, in Lyndon B. Johnson's word, not a policy choice to solve conflicts. It is because of this madness, this inevitable human flaw, that we may never be able to end war. But just because we cannot end war does not mean that we cannot struggle to limit or orient ourselves or our works towards the act of resistance. Observation 2 is farmer with a gun. The caption: a farmer aimed his rifle at a fighter plane high above in the sky, even though he had little hope of shooting it down. Therein lie his strength. This man, like ourselves, struggles against an enemy he will never defeat. Despite his age and weathered appearance, he shows his resolve. The enemy we'll orient ourselves towards is not the far-off U.S. fighter jet isolated from attack by farmer's antique rifle, but rather war itself. We realize that many may find our project as absurd as his, but we can only fire the weapon we are given. In this case, we will use debate as a space to leverage our will against the force of war. A small shoulder grinding against a giant. We will not submit, no matter the cost and the hope. We will hope against despair because we must win. Perhaps against all odds, we will change the world. Our farmer did not shoot down the fighter jet, but against every rational conclusion drawn prior to the war. His people turned away their attacker. Most importantly, his spirit prevailed. It is in his eyes and the wrinkles on his face and hands. It speaks to us now. Though the enemy is stronger than us, though we are hopelessly outmatched, our spirit too will prevail. Observation 3. Resolved. The United States federal government should substantially decrease its military and/or police presence in one or more of the following countries: Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Turkey, South Korea, or Japan. So why Vietnam? First and foremost, because these paintings exist and tell a larger story than the particular historical condition under which they were created. I created visual documentation of the American-Vietnam War from the other side, driven by the desire to share the personal epiphany I experienced through these drawings. In Herman Woolf's word, that war is an old habit of thought, an old frame of mind, an old political technique that must now pass as human sacrifice and human slavery have passed. The beginning and the end of war lies in remembrance, culminating in an archive of Viet Cong drawings, sketches, sketchbooks, letters, and war mementos. The thousands of books, documents, photographs, and films from our side no longer held their monopolistic authority. Second, because war is a system that repeats itself. This is more than just a memory. It was a particularly difficult time to revisit the Vietnam War after 9/11, when war was once again upon us. But the B-52s that had bombed Vietnam were bombing Afghanistan and would soon bomb Iraq. The parallels were not lost on the artist's wife, who was a nurse during the war. When I hear that there is a war, I feel very afraid. I know they have no medical supplies. I know that there is suffering and death. We had no anesthetic during surgery. We did not even have enough bandages. We boiled the bandages and used them over and over again. Observation 4. Liberation of a jail during the Tet Offensive. Art will find a way, as will life. This painting or drawing, to be more accurate, is a section of red cardboard and magic marker. It survived the Tet Offensive despite the fact that nearly nothing else did. It is a reminder not just of war, but of the irreplaceable power of the human spirit when confronted with the awful condition of war. Just like the jailbreak it depicts, this object came from depression into light. It is the voice of experience, having been there, but also something more vulnerable than experience, creation itself. It is a child, demanded protection, and it still does. It is a voice of a human creation to the Creator in all of us. It lives to tell its story. Many of us did not. Didn't they deserve better? Final observation. The morning after the war was over, so smooth, fragile, so fresh and sweet, specks of moisture, dust, cool on the lip. The entire universe dissolved in a blanket of mist. I ride and swim the waves of white. Roads appear, disappear in the haze. Reality, illusion, a dream. I wait in silence for you. Tree shadows blur, K-pop flowers flicker and wave. A bomb driven deep into the earth. A white mist hovering imperceptibly over a crater since evening. Lampposts thin as reeds in the streets, spiked shadows like children's magic shows. You move softly, step by step, easily, as if it were nothing at all. This is Nguyen Dai in 1975. If we were all artists, there would be no war. Nguyen Tu. 2 million civilians in South Vietnam. 2 million civilians in North Vietnam, and 1.1 million North Vietnamese and NLF combatants perished during the 2 Vietnam Wars. 250,000 South Vietnamese, 58,226 American, and 5,890 Allied combatants perished during the American-Vietnam War. Didn't they deserve better? There's your first example. This brings up an important part of this discussion. And it's this idea that you heard in the middle of this 1AC, which is, what are we using debate for? And in this context, we were using debate as a tool to be able to discuss the way that war happens, to be able to disclose some of the other side of the conflict, and of course to throw whatever agency we have in the world out against this seemingly undefeatable foe, right? It is about reclaiming some kind of agency. So the first question I want to ask you is this one. Why debate? Why do y'all do debate? So this is the part where you have to participate. Well, that's a vast question.
I like to debate because of the intellectual aspect of it, just how interesting topics are.
Good.
Because it's fun.
Yeah. What makes it fun?
Competition.
Yeah. Competition. You know, like getting too worked up about debates. What else? What other things?
Because I'm not good at sports.
What's that? That's the honest answer. Not good at sports. Any other answers?
It's rewarding when you have a good round.
What's that?
It's rewarding when you have a
Yeah,
good
what
round.
makes it rewarding?
Just being able to discuss things in depth.
Yeah. You get this chance to discuss, right? You get an hour and a half to talk to the other smartest kids in the country about interesting topics. That's awesome. Zach, why do you debate?
Because it helps me become a better person.
Yeah, well, how?
I don't know, it really gives me some sense of identity. Like it's an activity where I finally felt like there's some place I belong. Not just in like this activity, but kind of in life. So
Yeah. That was for me too. Identity and belonging. two big points. You know, I was the shy kid in high school, you know. I didn't talk to anyone else. I was busy reading books, you know. And so debate was the first time where I ever walked into a room and felt like I was at home with other people that weren't my family, you know. Defined who I was in a lot of ways. And that is an amazing aspect of debate, right? Something that all of us can come here, feel like we're family, feel like we're invested in something together. And that's really part of what this type of debate is about. If debate can do all of these things for us, you know, then, you know, I think we owe something back to it. I spent a long time thinking that debate was about just these top parts, you know. Spent a long time thinking it was just about competition and those things. And I met a couple of people who changed my way of thinking. And the first one of those was the ND2 champion this year, Ryan Wash. And many of you might not know Ryan. I'll tell you a little bit about his story because he's really introduced me to this kind of debate. He went to Kansas City Central High School, and I'm going to show you the Kansas City Central method for performance debate in a second. We're going to put it on the board. But Kansas City Central is one of the poorest school districts in the country, constantly battles with accreditation, which means getting funds to be able to maintain the school, have classes, have after-school programs. In fact, for the last couple of years, debate at Central has ceased to exist. Well, back in the 90s, there were some students at Central who looked around at the community and noticed that there were certain characteristics that debaters tended to exhibit. They tend to be white, they tend to come from backgrounds of privilege, and they tend to talk about things in a very particular way. And these folks from Central said, well, that doesn't make me feel like I have an identity in this space. I don't have a sense of belonging here. And so they said, we're going to create a way of doing debate that allows us to invest ourselves in this space. And they came up with what is called the three-tier method. And the three-tier method relies essentially on three main parts. The first is that they say any good advocacy should contain the ideas of traditional intellectuals. These are your PhDs, these are your experts, these are your, the Associated Press, right? All of these things would be considered traditional intellectuals, right? People who are out there writing on a field because they've studied it. These people obviously offer tremendous insight into the way the world works and functions. We have to have that to be part of any advocacy. The second thing they said is in order to have an advocacy, you have to personally invest. What does the topic mean to me? What do I mean to the topic? And this step here became super revolutionary because, you know, if you are a poor black kid growing up in the ghetto in Kansas City, you know, the topic might matter to you differently than it matters to other people, right? Or how do I mean to the topic? In the performance you just saw, how do I mean to the topic? Well, I meant very little to the topic, right? It sort of had to be upfront about that. This topic is asking giant questions, and I am one small person. So how do I interact in that space? How do I carve out some sense of identity and belonging where I can have some kind of ownership over this thing? This is a very important question they ask. Invest yourself. The third thing that they said is you need to have what are called organic intellectuals. Alright, now examples. These are, best to think of examples. I'm gonna give you some characteristics of these people in a second. My favorite example of this is Tupac Shakur. Alright, now yes, I'm a 33-year-old white man. I love hip hop music, and so Tupac, it was a big inspiration for me. Let me see a whole bunch of different sides of issues, right? He's not an expert, right? He's not a PhD, right? He's not a member of the press, but he does have a type of wisdom through lived experiences that might make him capable of talking about these issues. So, they say that these folks have 4 traits. Okay? First thing is that they are members of an aggrieved class. Right? They come from some situation where they have experienced some form of oppression, some form of social injustice they feel, some form of unfairness that they want to be able to sort out. They are members of an aggrieved class, or I prefer to say community. These people are often community leaders, oftentimes people like spiritual leaders, oftentimes people who you might not expect to be considered speaking on policy issues. The second thing is that they are attending to the needs of their community. All right. Now this is a part where some people will talk to you about the difference between hip hop and rap music, right? You know, there's lots of people who maybe would occupy this space, but instead of discussing the issues that their community are and holding out for those issues in the community, they decide to rap about their cool cars, or they decide to rap about money or something else like that. Those people aren't who we're talking about. We're talking about people who are discussing the issues that need to be rectified in their communities. Tupac did both of these things, by the way. Third is that they seek to build coalitions. Who knows what I mean by coalitions? What is a coalition? Anybody? Coalition? A coalition is a group of people who are sort of seeking out a similar agenda, right? So part of my purpose in being here, every time I talk to students, is to build a coalition, right? To try to bring people into the fold and demystify what it is happens in certain debate rounds, and try to build bridges that make debate a more constructive place, right? So this is a project of coalition building, right? We are all going to be better, more familiar, more friendly with each other. That is part of the needs of our community, right? If we're talking about identity and belonging, then we have to be out for each other's interests as well. We have to think about the world outside of our own backyard. The fourth is that it is counter-hegemonic. And this means that the other way I would say this is, I would say it is invested in dissent. Right? There is a dominant way of thinking about the world, right? These people tend to dissent with that way of thinking about the world, right? And that's why their intellectualism is referred to as organic, because it didn't come from the structures that are teaching them which values they ought to believe in, right? It's coming from their communities, it's coming from those needs, it's coming from the other people that they meet, and it's certainly engaging in a form of dissent against the dominant way of knowing the world. And in that sense, this type of debate isn't about a particular political ideology, right? That's why sometimes I fall off the handle when people say, call all critiques liberal, right? Because they're not necessarily. We've had a hegemony critique run on us before, right? The idea here is that in order to engage in this type of organic intellectualism, you just need to engage in dissent. So, for instance, many of us have probably heard of Cat K before, right? That's engaging in dissent because obviously we live in a profoundly capitalist system. But if in Venezuela, now that we have a socialist government largely in control there, if you were to, for instance, aid pro-US capitalist forces in Venezuela, that would be a form of dissent, just the same, right? It is still challenging the ideas of the dominant hegemonic structure that exists inside of a particular community. So you can think about those things. This isn't about a particular form of politics, but rather a method for thinking about these things. Okay? Yes?
On your organic intellectuals,
Sure.
you're using Tupac, and even, old men have heard of Tupac.
Yeah.
Since Zach is always called me old all week.
Sure.
But the organic intellectual, if I wanted to pull a cowboy poet that nobody has ever heard of, does that count as an organic
Sure.
intellectual?
Yeah, I think that it's like the difference. I don't know if you are interested in like Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, but I am. It's the difference between a wizard and a sorcerer. Okay, a wizard gains knowledge by reading, right? They learn spells by learning them from books, right? A sorcerer learns it from having arcane knowledge, right? It is a product of wisdom, right, that is learned. So the cowboy poet who's out, on the prairie by themselves, absent of these, other things, I think would definitely be considered this type of person. I think lots of poets are people like Charles Bukowski, people like Allen Ginsberg, right? These are the type of people that we're talking about when we talk about organic intellectualism. Does that answer?
Yeah, but I'm just trying to find the frame that if the organic intellectual has to have some public place,
Oh.
or if you can find the
Yeah.
public organic intellectual at any level.
Yeah, and oftentimes these people won't be published, right? Oftentimes it'll be it'll be someone you meet on a street corner or something like that says something wild that makes you think about the world a little differently, or, it doesn't have to be someone who is published. Like I said, oftentimes religious figures will consider themselves this way, especially ones who may not come from particular denominations that are less attached to like strict theology would potentially be considered these type of people too. Yeah, so it's a wide range, right? This isn't just about go out and find your favorite rapper, right? I talk about rap because I love rap. Grant Morrison, if you like comic books, I think is an organic intellectual, right? He didn't learn how to do that from anyone else. It was just a product of his being in the world, and so those are some of the things to think about. Now, this method right here is just one example, and I think what we did after learning this was to say, okay, that works for a particular model, but I wanted to open it out, and in large part because there's some stuff I wanted to talk about that didn't just have to do with organic intellectualism. So then we changed the factors down to these three things: identity, purpose, and method. I don't know if this is how other people think about performance debate, but this is largely the way I do. This personally investing stuff goes right here. All of these topics, at some point, you're going to have to say to yourself, how do I relate to this topic? Who do I want to be? And why debate? Right? Why debate? So what is my identity? How do I relate to this topic? How does this topic relate to me? What do I think about it? Right? Do I think we should be economically engaging these countries in South America and Mexico? Right? Do I think that we should, maybe you profoundly disagree with socialism or with globalization, or you did some reading about the Zapatistas and you think that that's interesting, right? What do you mean to the topic, and what does the topic mean to you, right? That's a very important question. How can you activate your own sense of identity and belonging inside of debate, right? Purpose. What do you intend to do? just heard, its purpose is pretty explicitly stated. Its purpose is to use our personal agency to speak out against the awful conditions of war, to be a small shoulder grinding against a giant wheel, is the way that the affirmative puts it. To stand up and be an activist in whatever way that's possible, even though we are feeble in our attempts. So what is it intending to do? It's intending to engage in activism, right? It's attempting to change the way we think about knowledge, right, which is called epistemology, right? Trying to take the knowledge that we already know about a subject and complicate it by giving us new information about that subject that might change the way we think about it, right? After reading the Mekong Diaries, my entire notion about Vietnam had to radically change, right? Because I couldn't just think about these people we were fighting as someone over there anymore, right? I had seen the things that they had done. I had seen the work that they created with their hands. I could identify their humanity in it. So it changed the way I thought about these things. Now, if I could share that revelation with every person that I debate with, then maybe I am a small shoulder grinding against a giant wheel, right? Maybe I have engaged in some type of activism that's important, right? The method is how you achieve your purpose. Now here, you're going to hear debaters talk about discourse all the time, right? Well, we're going to have discourse about this subject. We're going to talk about it, and this and that, right? And that's important, right? This is what we do in debate. It's the project of talking about things. But there are other methods aside from just discourse, right? In this particular work, we saw art used as a method, right? And art is introduced as another type of evidence, right? It's not just here's a painting for you to look at. It's literally here's another piece of evidence about this problem that you should find a way to record in this debate, right? To make you think about this problem differently. So art can be used. You can use music. You can use poetry. And then there are other people who ask questions like accessibility as a method. Right? And that is the question of, are we maintaining a place where people are safe to share their identity and maintain a sense of belonging? Right? So are our practices in debate, the ones that we are going to affirm and negate at the end of these debates, are they achieving the goals that we have set out for ourselves about why we in fact do debate? Right? That's how I started writing pretty much every performance argument I've ever done. So if you're interested, you should start to think about some of those things. There's one other method that I'll share with you later, and I'm going to read this just for Pogany over here. And that's superhero consciousness. I'm an unadulterated comic book nerd, and there are a couple of people who talk about using superhero consciousness as a way of creating political activism. I know it's crazy, but it's pretty fun and it does work.